My Lords, I'm delighted to follow the noble Lord Willoughby de Brooke, for two reasons. One is that he very properly paid a compliment to the alternative report, and in declaring an interest as a co-chairman of the campaign for an effective second chamber, to which the noble Elder Sandwich referred, I can say that we have, from money subscribed by members of your Lordship's House and coming from nowhere else, we have been able to fund the publication in permanent form of this admirable document, and there are copies in the cloakroom, in the library, in all the whip's office, and any member of this House who has difficulty in obtaining one has only to ask me or the noble Baroness Simon, and it will be presented, in her case, autographed. But the other reason that I am delighted to follow the noble Lord Willoughby de Brooke is this, that he referred to 1911 and the part his grandfather played in those momentous days. And it gives me an opportunity to remind your Lordship's House, we talk as if nothing has happened since 1911 so often. How ridiculous that is. This House has altered more during the reign of Her Gracious Majesty Queen Elizabeth II than almost any other institution in this country. When the Queen came to the throne, there were no women in this House. When the Queen came to the throne, there were no life peers. It was a Conservative government, I remind your Lordships, that produced the legislation that led to the advent of women peers and life peers. And then, of course, we had that other momentous change at a time when I was privileged to lead on constitutional affairs in another place, when the government of Mr. Blair decided on a mass expulsion of hereditary peers. I was unhappy about the way that was done, but it has altered beyond recognition your Lordship's House. I might just say in parenthesis that if the noble Baroness Thatcher, when she was Prime Minister, had only accepted a bill that I introduced in another place in 1984, which would have cut down the number of hereditary peers, and they would have elected so many of their number at the beginning of each Parliament, we might not have had the traumas of 1997 to 1999, but that's another story. We are debating this afternoon, my Lords, the report of the noble Lord Richard on the draft bill that was produced by the government almost a year ago. And of course we all owe to the noble Lord and to his colleagues on the committee a great debt of gratitude. But in his speech he very honestly said that of course he was constrained, his committee was constrained. They were not dealing with a clean sheet of paper. They were dealing with a draft bill, and he decreed, quite rightly, that that was what they had to concentrate on, which is one reason why the noble Baroness, Lady Simon and others decided that they wanted to produce a more far-reaching report, and we are very much in their debt for that. But in dealing with the draft bill, Lord Richard and the committee were very, very constrained, and that was underlined by the speech of my noble friend Lord Norton of Louth, when he talked about going back to first principles, because the committee had no opportunity, my Lords, to go back to first principles. And they were dealing with a document that was essentially flawed, very flawed indeed. A flawed premise. The premise that you could maintain the supremacy of the House of Commons if you had two elected chambers. Well, the committee, Lord Richard's committee, drove a coach and horses through Clause 2 and made it quite plain that that just is not the case. And so, my Lords, you have to face up to the question, what is the relationship to be between the two houses? And this is where, again, there was the flawed premise, because in constitutional matters, form should follow function. And that really is the reason why the noble Baroness has suggested in the report to which she and her colleagues have produced that there should be a constitutional convention to look at first principles, to look at function, and then to determine form. We are asked to agree to form without regard to function, and that is wrong. And it's illustrated, particularly, my lords, in that, I must choose my words with moderation and care, I would have said fatuous, but that strange proposal that there should be a hybrid house. What happens in a hybrid house if you have 20% of the members who are appointed and the others who are elected? You have two categories, you have two classes of member. And as the noble Lord Kerr pointed out at a meeting that I attended only last week, and indeed I made it in my own, made the point in my own evidence to the committee, if you have a situation where the 20%, the non-elected, carry the day, you have the makings of a constitutional crisis, if the bill is a very important one. And of course, if you recognize the validity of that proposition, and therefore have a 100% elected House, you would do away at a stroke with that valuable ingredient in your Lordship's House, to which the noble Baroness Knight of Coventry referred in her intervention. You get rid of the independents. I sat at the other end of the corridor, my lords, for 40 years. During the whole of that time, we had virtually no independent members elected in the House of Commons. There were those who bore the label, but it was either because there'd been some constituency spat, sometimes within the political party concerned, as in one of the Welsh seats, I think Ebervale, or there had been a local issue like Wyre Forest and the Kidderminster Hospital, or something of that nature, but there was no phalanx of independent members. So even if those who are here, because of their illustrious careers in the Foreign Service, the Civil Service, and all the rest of it, sought to stand for election, and many of them would believe it was not the right and proper thing to do in a political contest, they wouldn't get here anyhow. And so if you value a House with an independent group of experts, and as I speak now, I look across and see the noble Lord Morris, they don't all sit on the cross benches. The noble Lord Winston, who informs every debate in which he takes part in this House with his superb knowledge. I may not always agree with what he says, but by Jove, he enriches the place by his presence. And you're not going to get that in the sort of assembly that would result from a bill, a cobbled-together bill, such as we are now threatened with, and I hope it will not come to pass. The noble Baroness, the Baroness Scott of Needham Market, in her speech, said that we are suffering from wear and tear. Well, some of us more than others perhaps, but she's completely right, of course. This House does need reform. But as others have pointed out, there is a bill, the so-called Steel Bill, which addresses most, if not all, of these issues, and on which, my lords, I believe it would be very possible to have consensus. And we could reform this House. We could reform it in a way that would be very acceptable and much less expensive than the elected House with which we are now threatened. And I would urge those in government to consider this very, very carefully, and to consider the convention that has been suggested by the noble Baroness Simon. It is something that merits serious and sympathetic consideration. Because, my lords, we are talking about the British Constitution. We're not talking about something that should be the plaything of any particular political personality. We're not talking about something which should be regarded, as someone said, as the glue that holds the coalition together. We are talking about the future of our country. And there are, of course, other things that could be done in the future. The noble Lord Lowe of Dalston, who will be addressing us shortly, has an idea for electoral colleges, which he will explain, but which I believe has some merit and is worth serious consideration and debate. But I end on this note. 2 points. When he gave evidence to the Joint Committee, the Clerk of the House of Commons made the point that at the moment the House of Commons and the House of Lords are complementary to each other. If we had 2 elected chambers, they would be in competition with each other. And if we are to move to that, I believe, undesirable state, then surely the people must have the ultimate decision. How fatuous to wave the flag of democracy, but to say, but you can't have a vote on it. That, my lords, is the ultimate insult to the British people. And up with that we should not put.